Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. As you guys know, I don't sit in just a box. I always think outside the box. And this is why I have guests with so many different ways of thinking when you're going through your breast cancer journey. And I always say to people, think outside the box when you're deciding what's best for you. Having said that, I'm going to interview today Courtney Cowie. Now, Courtney is a certified nutrition therapy practitioner and functional diagnostic traditional practitioner with a background in bodywork therapy and Chinese medicine. After spending 3.5 years living and studying in Tokyo, where she first experienced the healing potential of Chinese medicine and a holistic health approach. A former competitive swimmer at Big Ten lightweight rower, Courtney experienced her own gut health breakdown as a result of overtraining, overachieving, nutrition deficiencies, and toxic exposure. She believes the body's symptoms are its wisdom in action and empowers her clients to take ownership of their health through education, lifestyle change, and natural solutions. Courtney is committed to creating a compassionate, non judgmental space while instilling hope and confidence in her clients' ability to heal. Having said all of that, welcome to my podcast, Courtney.
Thank you so much, Grace. I'm super excited for this conversation.
Well, so am I, to be honest with you, because I've always, well, not always, I lie. Uh, Being diagnosed back in 2018, I myself, find different modalities, and different ways of healing someone, whether it's someone who's still going through cancer or it's someone who's in, like they're a thriver or a survivor and they don't want to go backwards. And one of the most profound things I actually found out, because we always talk about the gut, right? Isn't it crazy? We talk about the gut. The gut's the second brain. The gut's the second brain. But a lot of people would say, well, what does that actually mean? And I would say, well, this is one brain, but the gut is the emotional brain. But we're now going in deeper and we're finding out that the gut plays a really, really crucial role in your overall health. We're hearing that so many things go back to the gut first or start at the gut first. So take us on that journey. So, what made you get into all of that gut health besides your own experience? Yeah, so let us know what made you go into sharing this with others?
Yeah, absolutely. So, why I'm in the gut health field is definitely right joined into my own personal health struggle. So, I mean, all the way back to childhood, I was having regular stomach aches, and it felt really normal back at the time. Thinking back on it, like I grew up as a pretty healthy kid. Otherwise, was really active, really athletic, and had three younger brothers. So I was like the only girl in the family. And so it just seemed like those symptoms were kind of particular to me. And my parents, I don't think really worried about it because they're like, well, you'd lay down on a pillow for about 20 minutes, you'd feel better, you'd get up, you'd be just fine again. So, like, why would we take you to the doctor? I kind of grew up in that family culture of like, if nothing major is wrong and it goes away pretty quickly, no big deal, right? But now that I've kind of come full circle and I've become a practitioner, like looking back, I can see those were like the early signs of something not right, Grace. So, like, I made it into my 20s. I would have those stomach aches off and on, and they were kind of annoying. But other than that, there were times, I guess, thinking back, they would interfere with my ability to, play in soccer games. Or I remember being at like swim meets because I did swim team as a kid and laying on like the gym floor of schools because I was having like stomach cramping, and then kind of forced myself to get up and like walk out to the pool and kind of force myself to start swimming. And weirdly, sometimes I'd get through that. And I don't know if it was the adrenaline or endorphin rush you get from the competition, but like it would really knock that discomfort down. So it was just always weird like that, growing up, but I could function. And so when I got into my 20s and I was in college, I was still having stomach aches to a point. And I can't say there was like this one specific stressor event that really led to like more GI breakdown. But what I can tell you is thinking back, somewhere in my early to mid 20s, I was starting to have more bouts of like loose stool. And I started to toy with my diet, try this food, try that food, try eating this way, try eating that way. And I even went on a raw foods diet for a period of time and got way worse on that diet. So I started to make these connections that like the foods I was eating were very much connected to the degree of symptoms I was having. And so I would course correct when I would do something that would make myself worse, but I didn't really have all of the pieces of the puzzle then. And so and it wasn't like an ongoing thing. I'd have these bouts where things would get worse and then they'd kind of get better and, I'd be okay again. And it was when I got back from my last year of study abroad in Japan, which was, when things were kind of starting to get to a pretty bad point, that I decided to finally go in and see a GI doctor and have like my first full workup done. And at that point, they did kind of all of the diagnostic testing that they could do reasonably, found nothing really wrong, was given the diagnosis of IBS, which so many people are really, which says nothing, right? Like it's just kind of like, you've got these symptoms. We can't really diagnose you with anything because we can't find anything wrong with you, but we can offer you fiber or a probiotic or even a drug to like slow down your motility. And so go ahead and try that. And I think I tried the probiotic. None of that really seemed to make a big difference. And again, I was kind of in and out of like doing worse and doing better. And it wasn't really until some more years went by, I went through some major life stressors. I went through a divorce. I had had my first child. I became an entrepreneur and was starting to build a practice. All of those things, I think, in combination, were kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And I mean, I just really went downhill and I had like a flare like I've never had before. I was like day after day running to the bathroom, running to the bathroom. And this went on for like weeks. And in the beginning, I remember telling myself, like, this is going to resolve. It must have just been I ate something bad. It must have just been something happened, but it didn't get better, Grace. And so that was, I think, the first time in my life I really truly felt scared. And it was like, okay, like this isn't normal. I do remember going back to the GI doc. It was probably the same one I saw the first time. She just looked at me. She's like, this is just IBS again. And she kind of like diminished it, right? And well, we did the full workup. We know what it is. You need to just go home and do all the things and maybe go see a dietitian. And I remember feeling like really humiliated walking out of that office because I was like, no, like I know my body. I'm not an idiot. I've already started to go down the rabbit hole of reading books on diet and nutrition. This isn't just this, right? And I don't think you can help me. Like I was very clear on that conclusion. I'm like, I don't think you can help me at this point. And so that was what really started my journey into functional health, functional medicine, even getting deeper into Chinese medicine. I had had some exposure when I lived in Japan, and I had enough improvement from the herbs I took when I was over in Japan that I could recognize that these were natural things that were able to help support symptom remediation, right? Like I was able to notice that these were actually helping to support my body to function well, not like drugs, which I knew were just at best band-aiding symptoms. And so I just really had a heart to learn this stuff. And it was very much fueled by like wanting to fix my own health struggle. But then I was still early in building a practice as a licensed bodywork therapist. And I was seeing clients dealing with a lot of just body aches and pains. But secondary to that, a lot of internal health struggles, whether that was digestive issues like I was having, or just other things that you could tell very clearly, like this is tied to how your body is doing on the inside as much as it is these pain issues you're having on the outside. So that's kind of what started me down the path. And I think just being an athlete early on and having an interest in performance and diet and nutrition, like that spark was lit way, way back in time, but it kind of morphed into this interest more so in, okay, how do I eat to regain my health when my own health started to really go down a bad path? And honestly, even to this day, Grace, like I think a lot of the foundational elements were probably set up even as far back as like, my teenage years with doing a lot of intense training, and that started to weaken the body, and then kind of added, all of these factors until it got to this point where literally the breaking point happened and, things just kind of went over the cliff. And so, yeah, that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Wow, that's a really like it's profound where you try so much. It's something that was with you so long. You like you said, in your early years, in your 20s and things like that. And a lot of people brush it off as like we were saying, IBS. Well, if the doctor said, this is that whole, well, if the doctor says that's what it is, that's what it is. I'm not going to go against the grain.
Yeah.
And what they do is they end up, like you said, they end up taking medication just to band-aid the effect and not really go into it and see it. I remember being diagnosed with IBS, and in my like what at back then, I would say, oh, IBS is I'm full of BS. I'm BS. I'm full of BS. So for me, it was like I had to get rid of stuff um, on a psychological, on a spiritual, on a, whatever it is, physical. And what it was is I was thinking, this is me. I'm not dealing with something. And for me, like I say, that the gut for me was my emotional side, and I'm a very an emotional person. So
Mhm.
if something was going on with my gut, I'm like, okay, it's got to be. I mean, I didn't just brush it off, be all end all. But I knew that it was related. And going forward, I realized that every time my gut hurts, it's like, okay, what's really going on? But having said that, that's the emotional side. We don't want to write off the emotional side, but now we're going to look at, right, what else is there? What else is going on? And like I said in the beginning, it's now everyone's saying that it definitely is linked to a
Mhm.
dis-ease no matter where it is in the body. So, you know, having said all of this, so when was that aha moment for you where you said, I understand, now I get what's happening, and then you went from there? What was it? What was it that you found?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, to help you
That
through
figured out.
that.
So I had a lot of those, to be honest with you, because my journey, and I don't know if yours was like this too, Grace, but it had ups and downs, and it was, I'd say, relatively complex. It wasn't like a simple, eat a low FODMAP diet and fix the IBS. And I do want to just say real quick too that I agree with you that I do feel there's always an emotional block component to things like IBS, like 100%. There's emotional roots to these disease states or these illnesses, right? But I think the first big aha moment I had on my journey was when I was able to get my symptoms into remission through diet change plus digestive support alone, period. Like that was all I did. Now, it was a pretty extreme diet change from where I had been, right? So, like most people, I ate what I thought was a healthy diet. Again, always having that eye towards athletics and competitions. I don't think I had like a terrible diet, but I did not have anywhere near the nutritional knowledge I do now, right? Like foods I thought were healthy, even foods you'd find at the grocery store that were deemed healthy, right? Still had ingredients in them or were processed in a way that, especially if you've got quite a bit of gut breakdown or just inflammation going on beneath the surface, certainly weren't helping my case, right? So it took just a lot of understanding of like, first of all, like the things I thought were working for me probably were not, right, for a very long time. And just to add to that, I was also a vegetarian for 10 years of my life, having no idea that that also was a big factor leading to probably a lot of digestive breakdown. Yeah. So there was that whole element, but the first big aha, like I said, was just being able to get my bowels functioning in a normal healthy manner through diet change and digestive support alone. Now, that was huge because it kind of disproved the GI doc's whole, argument that there's really no good explanation for this. I probably had seen a number of GI docs, honestly, over time, and some of them would say, well, there probably is something you can do with diet, but they were very non-specific. They didn't have any specific guidance, and they didn't really have anything to give me specifically to do, and they didn't really want to say like it's all diet. None of them would say that. And then there were others that would say, well, just take a pill, because like you shouldn't really have to worry about what you eat. Just take a pill because this is just a disorder. Other people can eat whatever, they don't have these symptoms. And I always found that to be crazy because it's like, but this is the very system that processes food. So I was able to kind of disprove this sort of dismissal of diet that even GI docs had that I had encountered, right? But then there was this other, reality where I got better doing that, but life happens. And to be honest with you, I was eating a pretty restricted diet to keep things in order. And that wasn't something I was able to maintain, ultimately for a long period of time. And so eventually I kind of went back to incorporating more foods and, eating a broader range of things, not necessarily unhealthy things, but just opening up my diet. And little by little, sooner or later, a lot of those symptoms started to resurface. And then a lot of the same things I was dealing with started to come back. And so that was kind of the first signal that, like, okay, there truly is something going on deeper, that diet can manage this, but to manage it fully with diet feels like that's not tenable, because that this is just too hard, right? To be that restricted. And so that was where getting into functional testing and looking for data to really understand what is going on beneath the surface in my gut. I want to understand, do we have bacteria out of whack here? Are there bad players like parasites in the gut driving some of these symptoms? And so I did, in the very beginning, see some functionally trained practitioners on my own accord. Interestingly, I don't remember any of them running a really good quality functional stool test. I think I had one functional stool test done, Grace, and it was okay. It was like better than the test a GI doc would run. But now, again, that I've come full circle, it's like looking back, I'm like, that wasn't really a great test, but it was a starting point, right? And I was able to get some data from that and get a little further down the process. But it probably wasn't until I was going to get continuing education in various areas of understanding gut disorders. And specifically, one of the continuing education programs I enrolled in was Allison Seebeker's SIBO Pro course. And she's known here in the US as like one of the forefront practitioners in treating small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, right? Which is a big driver of IBS. It's like linked with upwards of like 70% of IBS. And so I knew when I enrolled in that course that that was a part of my puzzle. Like, I'd already done some lactulose breath testing. I'd seen it come back with, high levels of methane and hydrogen gases. And so that part, I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. And so when I went through her course and I started to use some alternative methods to clear that SIBO and they didn't work, that was like my next aha. I was like, wait a minute, like this should work and this isn't working. And so I remember having like Q&A with her in like a group practitioner session, and she just was like, this would be the time where you'd start to think about deeper things going on here, like mold toxicity and Lyme disease. And I had not yet gone down that rabbit hole. And I was like, okay, I'm really resistant to this, but like I've kind of covered a lot of bases and I've come this far. Like, I have to look at this now, right? So I said to her, okay, like this, I get it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to check this out. And she's like, I would start with the mold. And so that then sent me down that path. And back then, urine mycotoxin testing was just starting to kind of become the gold standard, well-used tool in functional medicine. And I actually was just starting to explore that area of mold toxicity and started with cheek swab testing just to check for genetic potential, because there is a lot of research and data done by like Richie Shoemaker and other, pioneers in the field of like mold sickness, showing that certain individuals carry genes that when they get activated due to environmental factors can make them more susceptible to getting mold sick if they live or work in moldy buildings. And so I'm like, let's start with the gene piece first, and tested myself. And sure enough, I carried like the genotype for mold toxicity. I also discovered, Grace, that I had the genotype for celiac disease, which shocked the heck out of me because the GI doc had missed that. I indirectly caught that through this mold, cheek swab testing. And so that was a huge aha as well, because although I knew avoiding wheat was advisable, right, for all manner of digestive illness, and I had been doing it to a pretty good extent, I think there was this part of my brain that was always thinking behind the scenes, like, I don't think there's really I don't notice when I eat wheat, there's a big deal, and so I really had to get smart on that. And that really made it super obvious. Like, this is a big piece of probably the puzzle for you. You have to be like 100% wheat avoidant and compliant here. And so that was huge. Figuring out the mold toxicity piece was huge for me. I did go on then after the cheek swab test to do some urine mycotoxin testing, got that confirmed. I was dealing with high levels of mold colonization. So yeah, it was really kind of going, I think, deeper and deeper and trying to get the next answer in the puzzle and using root cause testing to really get that data. And then I could finally like feel validated that, oh, this is truly complex. Like this isn't just like some crazy random thing going on. Like this is like IBS being expressed as a result of these, you know, unfortunate, like, potentials I have to have wheat sensitivity. I've had wheat exposure driving this, toxic exposure driving this, hidden gut infections driving this. Like, to be able to parse that out, I mean, you do really kind of have to know what you're dealing with and be able to identify, okay, here are all the factors that would make sense and explain why this struggle is so difficult to overcome. So yeah, those are the big kind of aha moments that come to mind in the whole journey that I went through.
Yeah, wow. So that's the thing too, because like you were saying, you come from being someone who, you're like 10 years a vegetarian, like you were saying, and we're not here to judge what diets because my
Yeah.
husband is doing, well, he's been doing more, almost a year now. He's been doing the carnivore diet.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
sure. Sure.
so everyone is different. But what I
Right.
wanted to say is, like, I wrote down the question here, but like you were saying that, the digestive tract, like we're talking about what's good, what isn't, it comes more to, because a lot of people, I guess, when you can open a can of worms where you say, what is it in the foods? Now, as a vegetarian, there,
Mhm.
what you had to go through, like what foods was there as a vegetarian that were making things worse? So did you have to cut out certain foods and then reintroduce them, or did you go on a totally different sort of, route and track your, these other things? Like you were saying, you then found out you had other issues by doing the swap and everything, and the
Yeah.
cheeks and that. But like, did you realize that there were might have been, because the reason I'm trying to say it is because everyone swears by whatever diet they're doing. They swear by it. My
Right.
husband swears a carnivore is the best thing out there. A vegan will swear that it's the best thing out there. Vegetarian, the same. You name
Yeah.
it. Someone who's doing the Mediterranean diet, you
No,
name
for
it. They're
sure.
all
For sure.
swearing by it. What I'm trying to work or trying to say, I guess, and if you can understand me, and I apologize if you don't, is no matter what diet you decide to do,
Hmm.
what is the best protocol going forward to make sure that you must love the Mediterranean diet or the vegetarian diet or whatever? You can still do it, but make sure that you find issues and replace those with other foods. So, would you have to replace other foods? What would you need to do in that manner once you find out you've got some of these issues?
Yeah, like for the gut is kind of what you're asking about, right,
Correct.
Grace?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I can kind of speak just from my own personal experience and just kind of where my brain has settled with diet. And this is going to be again very specific to people with IBS and IBD because we could argue their digestive systems are more sensitive, generally speaking, than the average person. And unfortunately, they tend to have reactions and sensitivities to foods that are healthy for other. I mean, they're healthy foods, right? Like other people without digestive disorders could eat them. So, like you said, diet is very bio individual. And I 100% agree with that. And I think the big learning curve I had just coming from being a vegetarian for 10 years, I mean, back at that point in time, I didn't fully understand how important having good macronutrient balances, and by that we're talking about the right balance of protein, fats, and carbohydrates. And I don't want to go down a big rabbit hole in teaching what those foods are, but just for like sake of argument, we'll just kind of talk generally speaking, right? Like protein, fats, and carbs are the main macronutrients that everyone needs in the diet to thrive, right? And now we could argue some people do better with higher amounts of fat and protein, less carbs. Others swear they do better with higher amounts of carbs and less protein fat, right? Like, I mean, there's a big spectrum. And if you look at like diets worldwide of, you know, ethnic populations, right? Like people that thrived on their own cultural ways of eating, like it's very diverse as well. And often bound to the type of climate where these folks lived, right? So like you look at like the Eskimos in Alaska have a higher fat diet because it's very cold climate and they eat a lot more like seafood and whale blubber and that types of things versus in like sub-Saharan Africa it's a lot more plant-based because there's a lot more stuff to eat that just grows naturally in the environment. So you know there really isn't truly like this one thing that works for everybody. But I will tell you, when I was a vegetarian, the thing that actually tripped me out of doing that was the last year I was in Japan and I was seeing a Chinese herbalist. And I mean, I was having weird things going on that hadn't, my big gut breakdown hadn't yet happened, but we're kind of, it's interesting. Like your podcast is all about like breast cancer survival and hormone balance, and that like I had issues with like hormone balance even because of all the GI stuff, right? So one of the things I was dealing with back then was I was passing out. And, also I didn't have a cycle. I had dropped my menstrual cycle for a big part of my 20s. And so when I sat down with that herbalist, like she was doing her full intake, and that blew my mind too, because I had never been through that kind of process back home. Like doctors certainly don't go that in depth with their assessments, right? And she was doing things like looking at my tongue and feeling my pulses and pressing in on my shin bone to see if there was like edema. And I was like, this is so fascinating. And like we get into this conversation, she's kind of explaining in like her Chinese medicine-y terms, like how the body, like the female body, it's like in winter state and everything's in hibernation because I'm not cycling. And I mean, it made sense. It was really cool. It was like the seasonal analogy. It's like you're in winter and we have to unfreeze the winter state and get the blood flowing and get things moving. I was like, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds really good. Like I was just like full on, like, let's go, and she's like, so I'm going to give you some herbs that you're going to add to water and drink. And I'm like, this all sounds really good. And then she goes, and I'm really going to strongly suggest you start eating meat again. Like you have to do this. If you keep going down this path, I fear your health is going to get worse and worse and worse. And I think I was like convinced enough at that point, and she had kind of like, to be honest, like instilled a little fear in me that I was like, whatever you say, lady, like I'm willing to do it. And she's like, like even if it's just small portions 3 times a week, like just try me, like just start a little bit and see how it goes. And so and the Japanese culture, by the way, is like so food crazy, right? They're so into food. So like in some ways, I probably psychologically was at a point where I was like, well, I really don't have any good reasons to keep doing the vegetarian thing other than, I never really did it in the beginning for like animal ethical reasons. I just thought it would be okay because you're getting all these like plant foods, and like in my early teenage brain, that was my thinking, right? So, but now I'm like 10 years into this and I'm like, I'm not really sure why I'm still doing this other than I haven't etten meat in a long time, but let's try it. I guess okay. So like, went to this Japanese like traditional food buffet, which had all kinds of like yummy things, and it was kind of cool because I remember thinking like, well, I actually am giving myself psychological permission to like try these foods. Like I've been told it's okay. There was something kind of freeing about that, Grace. I don't know. It's just a weird thing thinking back that it's like, yeah, the only person holding me to doing this diet was me. And now that I've kind of been convinced that this might not be the best thing for me, and I've been told and kind of like supported to go do this, like I can actually maybe enjoy myself and try some of these meat dishes I've been avoiding. So that was an interesting experience. And from there, it was just kind of like it just snowballed, right? Like I remember in the beginning, it was having a little bit to start, and that went okay. And so slowly it just kind of built into like more and more I was able to incorporate meat into my everyday diet. And I think it was also when I was out of, living abroad and had, say less potential to eat out and get more convenience-based types of food, like back in my own home kitchen, learning to cook it, right? And then once I got comfortable with that, it was like, yeah, why wouldn't I? And I can't say it was like this overnight shift, but I do think thinking back, like my energy got better. I know for sure that once I conceived and had my first child, I was like on that path of like having, organic food and really looking at getting, enough protein and healthy fat. I was in the early stages of becoming a nutrition therapy practitioner. And then once I understood that it is important to have food in its whole food form cooked properly so it's easy to digest no matter what you choose to eat. But I started to realize like actually animal-based foods after all are full of nutrients, like more so than plant-based foods. We could argue this, right? But like, and relatively digestible compared to certain plant-based foods. And they have, less capacity to potentially provoke the digestive system or the immune system because they don't have these like natural protective toxins that certain plants are full of, right? That can make them more problematic to people that have those sensitive guts. I was like, wow, this is revolutionary. And then eating more of a balanced diet that had a good amount of animal protein along with vegetables and fruits and other things, that actually like normalized me not only digestion wise, but like I was having like regular like cycles again, like regular periods. I didn't need herbs to support that. So in a lot of ways, like it just kind of reinforced like all along, I probably had a lot of major nutrient deficiencies that were driving like these background hormone imbalances, starting to brew these digestive issues that were going to start to like, peak and become a huge issue down the road. And, that was huge. So, I guess bringing this full circle, when I work with clients, especially ones dealing with IBS, IBD, those types of issues, the hardest thing we have to do is take a look at what they're eating and then have that conversation around, how do they feel about avoiding some of the foods that might be healthy but might be causing these symptoms for them? And can we do this in a way that's like not super duper stressful, feels doable? Part of what I do is help them find substitutions, kind of like you were suggesting, that get at their sort of their inherent flavor preferences or texture preferences, because like we all have them. Like I'll look at like what foods are showing up on their food journal and it's like, oh, I can tell you like yogurt, but if you've got small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, you've got a lot of bacteria already overgrown. We probably don't want to put more bacteria down the tube and just exacerbate that. So can we still get that creamy kind of craving you have in another way that avoids like, adding this probiotic load that might not be good for you in the state you're in right now? So those are those like smart kind of like nuanced substitutions that can be really powerful when you're looking to make dietary change that help to kind of feed that emotional part of the brain. Cause like, I truly believe like eating is an emotional experience, right? Like we have to be able to enjoy and love the foods we eat. And I feel like it doesn't have to be an either or, where diet change is this thing that's like all about restriction and rules. And like, I almost like cringe a little bit with the term elimination diets. I mean, yes, the truth is we do sometimes have to use elimination diets to bring the symptoms under control, but it doesn't mean we can't do it in a way that's still adventurous and allowing for trying new foods that actually people are often surprised taste amazing. And they're like, I would have never found this product on my own. And I had no idea that these things existed and I could substitute them for these other things I was eating that were causing me to have these digestive symptoms in the first place. So that kind of journey is like so rewarding for me to like watch a client go through. And I love being able to be like, have you heard of this? And are you aware of this product? Would you be open to learning about this? Like, can we look at this? Is this something you can source in your local grocery store? Like, we'll have those conversations and it's really fun. And I love when they're just like, oh, that looks really good. I'd like to try that, and it becomes that kind of curiosity and like open, interest kind of process, which is really what you need to make that long-standing change and get people oriented in a way that they now feel confident. Like they've got a way of eating, they've got products they can work with that are going to be healthy for them and keep their symptoms kind of dialed in.
Yeah, and it's really, really important they do that because the thing is, especially for women who have like or who've been diagnosed with breast cancer, the first thing I always hear is, oh, should I cut out all my sugar? And it's like, well, what do you consider sugar? Because
Yeah.
like they think, oh, I have to let go of my Coke and my donut. But hang on a minute, fruits have got sugar too. So just be
Yeah.
mindful because you probably think, oh, I'm cutting out my, like you said, a donut, but I'm having, even more fruits with high in sugar. You've got to be
Yeah.
mindful. You got to make sure that you know your body better than anyone, I guess, and then
Yeah.
understand, like you said, what foods are where. Where is it helping you? You like this, we're going to take it away, but it's okay. We're going to replace it with this. And, that was one of the things that I learned as well along the way, because I used to get a lot of heartburn till I found out that, because Western medicine, quotation shouldn't say it like that, but anyway, tells you that it's because you got too much acid in your stomach, and it's actually reversed. You don't have enough. Therefore,
Yeah.
that's why you're getting that heartburn. But what did I do? Did I get rid of the foods that I love? No, I just changed it up. Like you said, oh, well, because I've always been told in my case, no oranges, no tomatoes, no anything acidy. because it gives you
Mhm.
heartburn. And I used to
Mhm.
think, well, God, don't even give me a glass of orange juice because it'll take me over the edge. And then people
Yeah.
would say, well, to help you with that, have a glass of milk. And I'd be like, are you serious? That's like putting petrol on the fire. So I'm like, don't do that. But it wasn't about that. It was about what was happening in my gut. Because the moment I
Exactly.
started to fix the gut, that's when I had a glass of orange juice. I was like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen, but it was fine. I didn't go and get a gallon, but I had a
Yeah.
glass. I have a latte, and I'm thinking, okay, this isn't too bad. I have a latte a day. It's okay. So I was just reintroducing things slowly. Do I sit
Yeah.
there and have 4 gallons of milk and 2 gallons of orange juice and, you know, cheese? I love my cheese. No, I just do it mindfully. But you
Yeah.
also speak about this functional hormone test, and
Yeah.
and I really want to touch on that because you said that it's really good for women who have gone through breast cancer or they're worried about a family history and want to get
Yeah.
some data. And the main thing I liked about it is because you talked about your estrogen metabolism. Now, I'm going to be selfish and say, well, this is what I want to know, besides my viewers and my listeners, because I'm now 54. I finished my period as of July last year. So technically speaking, I'm not a year, but my body has been changing. Estrogen level is going all over the place. My metabolism has gone on a permanent holiday. So even when I look at food now, I think I put on 2, 3 pounds even when I smell it. And I feel, my arms and my tummy, and I'm like, okay, which in fact is probably causing, not causing other issues, but is causing other things that I have to look into. So take us on that journey. Why is it really important to get this functional hormone test, and how does it help women just diagnosed with breast cancer or someone who wants to know if it's in the family, if they've got family issues?
Yeah. Oh, for sure, Grace. I love this question. So, yeah, one of my little fun gigs that I get to do is look at tons and tons of functional testing and then mentor and guide other nutritionists who run these tests with their client cases. So I've looked at lots of testing, and so I just have a real passion for this. And there are certain functional hormone tests that can be done that get a deeper level and more extensive data compared to the average blood testing that, like, say if you're lucky, you're going to go see an endocrinologist or a doctor of some sort, right, who might be open to looking at your female sex hormones. This is another whole piece with the whole menopause, entering menopause and perimenopause. I just find time and time again, because I work with mostly women clients and they're at that age, right? And they might be coming to me with GI issues, but they also likely have hormone issues too. And most women, when they start to enter that perimenopause, menopause, like they know stuff is going on and they're not feeling as well as they used to. And typically they'll go in and they'll have that conversation with the doctor, and a lot of times what the doctor will be telling them is like, oh, it's dangerous to use hormone replacement, like we shouldn't put that you on that, or if you have this history of breast cancer, like you best avoid that. And then they feel like their only option is to tough out that phase of life transition and just kind of barrel through it feeling like crap, right? Because these options aren't available to them and they can't support the sex hormone lowering that's naturally happening as women go through that transition to menopause. And so what often will happen is they'll maybe get blood work run to confirm, like, yes, your progesterone's low, oh, estrogen's low too. And maybe in some cases doctors might be willing to write like a hormone replacement script. And again, if they're really lucky, they'll get bioidentical hormone replacement therapy prescribed, but often not, right? Like in the conventional world, it's going to be more of just the average like synthetic hormone replacement. Crazy enough, I've actually seen clients that have been given only estrogen replacement and not progesterone along with it, which I think is crazy because both typically tank, right? And usually it's progesterone before estrogen. So like that's a whole nother topic to speak on. But to get back to your question on the testing piece, Grace. So what I love about functional hormone testing, especially if it's done through urine sample, is we can get a lot of information about the metabolites that the body's eliminating through the kidneys. And so, one of the tests that I really love to run is called the Dutch test. It's the dried urine test for comprehensive hormones, like abbreviated Dutch, right? And it can not only take a look at what is on average the levels we're seeing for estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, right? The main sex hormones, compared to kind of where we would ideally want to see those levels, for a woman who's, say, in her heyday of her cycle, right? Like, we have to keep in context, a woman in her 50s is not going to look the same as a woman who's 30, but at least it gives us a starting point. But with regards to estrogen, it goes a step further than just getting like total estrogen in the blood, which is kind of just one thing, right? Like, we can actually see how estrogen is getting metabolized through the phase one, phase two liver detox pathways. And believe it or not, there's different ways that the body can preferentially metabolize estrogen down these different phase one pathways. And sometimes this is a little bit determined or predetermined by how your genes are expressing and how your unique body likes to metabolize estrogen. And, good, bad, or otherwise, some women will just preferentially send it down what we call kind of the bad estrogen pathway, which is the 4OH pathway. I don't want to get too technical in this explanation, but, there's kind of the good metabolism and then the not so good metabolism. And then there's kind of a neutral metabolism pathway. And when estrogen predominates down that bad pathway, it can then create a lot of oxidative stress, which can take a lot of the body's own master antioxidant glutathione to try to neutralize that. And so it doesn't become kind of like reactive and lead to uncontrolled, cell growth, which is what we see right in all cancer states. Or what'll happen is the body will say, okay, we've got a lot of this like reactive quinone production coming from this bad estrogen. We're going to try to get it out through this other phase two pathway. And if that pathway is blocked or not moving well, now we've got this kind of backup in the pipeway. Like, you can almost think of these pipes or these pathways like pipes, right? Where like you've got these substances moving through and they're not good and the body's got to move it out. We don't want to see things getting backed up and stuck. And so, worst case scenario is a woman who's really pushing a lot of estrogen down the bad pathway. She can't get it out through the backup pathway. And she doesn't have enough glutathione and antioxidant to try to neutralize and deal with it. Now we've got the situation where we could start to have this real uncontrolled cell growth kind of fueling situation. And so, what's amazing about using a functional test is like we can really get very clear data on what is going on with her estrogen metabolism, no matter what stage of life she's at. And as you know, Grace, like things like cancer can take years in the making before they actually gain enough momentum that they become a diagnosed thing. And so, what I love about functional testing is if you're really health forward and you're sitting here listening to this and you're like, well, I'm in my 30s and like my mom's had it or my grandma's had it, or I've had a few aunts that have had it. Like, this is like the prime time to really go get testing and see what your body is actually preferentially doing. And the beauty is, if you are one of those bad estrogen metabolizers, there are some awesome, like natural things we can do to help support you off that pathway. So it's going more so down the good estrogen pathway and, reducing that risk of at least that process leading to a heightened risk of things like breast cancer or other types of female cancers. And so that's a big piece of it. The other thing that I love about functional hormone testing is we can get very clear data on whether or not the body is taking testosterone, which, believe it or not, is what your estrogen is made from. Like in all women, we make our estrogen from testosterone. And we can see whether or not the body is preferentially taking a lot of testosterone and moving it too much to estrogen. We call that kind of estrogen dominance, right? When we're shunting a lot of testosterone to estrogen. And deal with that too. And that can happen for a lot of reasons. Often there's a very strong metabolic component. So women who are struggling with, say, excess weight and they're feeling like they're struggling to lose weight and they're doing this and they're doing that with their diet and they've tried this and that. And it's very frustrating, right? Like they can be in this really stuck place of sometimes having this like mechanism turned on that's shunting a lot of testosterone to estrogen that's coming as a result of these secondary metabolic issues that they just can't seem to figure out. And so working at that from a diet change standpoint, as well as kind of using things to block that, shunting of testosterone to estrogen, can be hugely helpful in getting their estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone all balanced. And then with the longer term effort of like, let's try to get at what are the root cause things that are causing so much estrogen production happening here, whether that's, a slower metabolism because of diet and just not having, good nutrient dense foods. There could be other things like gut infections driving that could be actually causing that estrogen over predominance too. And so I love using functional hormone testing as a piece of the bigger puzzle to really dive into like, okay, we've got these other things going on. And, if we work at kind of the foundational aspects of nutrition and address any lifestyle things that might be driving these imbalances as well, like we can really get a person back in order and more balanced without having to rely on, major band-aids. I mean, with drugs, we're not able to do a whole lot other than give more progesterone if there's a lot of, estrogen dominating, but also give women options where they don't have to be stuck in this fear state of, I can't use hormone replacement therapy because I've either had breast cancer or I'm fearful I'm going to get it. We can actually get that clear data on what is going on with your hormones, right? And you might not actually be, shunting estrogen down that bad pathway after all. And that might not even be related to cancer potential in a woman's specific situation. So it can be just really helpful in clearing up like these vague fears around like my body can't do this, or I might get this if I take hormones. And when you see that data, it just gives you that like reassurance and confidence that you have the answers and there's something you can do about it, even if you do see things are not going in an optimal direction.
Yeah, you've actually got choices to go down whatever path you want to take it, and finding out,
Yeah.
like you said, finding out exactly which one it is actually narrows things down because, the thing is you get to an age and yeah, it's menopause, your metabolism slows down, your estrogen levels dropping, have a great life, and you sort of go, well, what's going on? And the thing is, too, like the older you get, more women are diagnosed with more, cancers as they get older. And, one of the things is you do need your estrogen. You do. Like it's
Mhm.
funny because I remember saying to my doctor, oh, I still got my period. And I remember her sort of like, what do you mean you still get your period? And I'm like, but isn't that a good thing? But I
Yeah.
think it's because it's that whole, ooh, estrogen, producing estrogen when you've just had cancer could be bad, blah, blah, blah. And then you hear the opposite, where you think, well, if
Yeah.
your estrogen level gets down, it's not good because it could cause all of these issues. And you're like, well, you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. But unless you know specifically what you need, what test you need, and you mentioned that because obviously the doctor runs a different test than what you're suggesting, which is
Yeah.
the thing is it's that whole thing. You go to your GP, they do your
Mm.
5 blood test types, cholesterol, iron level, whatever it is, that they look at, and that's it. Go home, have a great life. And it's very rare that you can ask a doctor to go, hey, could you do a thorough test? Because now I'm in this part of my life that I want to make sure. And even that, like even the tests, imagine going to your GP and saying, I would like to know where my metabolism's at. You
Right.
know, yeah, true. They're going to look at you like, what? What do you mean? Just
Yeah.
that doesn't even make sense. So this is where it's really important for a woman, no matter where she is in her stage, to really find out if she really wants to get herself in the long run, try and
Mm.
work out where everything is in her life. So that was really important. But also like going back to your gut health. How is your gut health linked with breast cancer? Because I think we touched on it in a way, but if you can just go a little bit further, because
Deeper with that.
people are probably going, why is she talking about the gut? It has nothing to do with my breast
Yeah.
cancer. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Like I said, diseases are from the gut. This is what we're learning now. It's not now that it's come out, it's just been around forever. the more people are talking about it now, and it's really important to do so. So tell me, how are those two linked up?
Yeah, for sure, Grace. So, there's like three things that really come to mind here. So, the first one is kind of back to the liver, as we talked about, right? Which is a digestive organ. It's also the body's main detoxification organ. So, when we think about making hormones, like we create these hormones every day, and the body has to be able to metabolize and get rid of them through the liver. So, if we have any inhibitions in those elimination pathways, including things like pooping every day, which, believe it or not, is a bigger deal and problem for people than they admit. Like, that's a whole nother conversation. But sometimes I'll have conversations with prospective clients, and they don't realize not having a bowel movement every day is already increasing their level of toxicity, including ineffective hormone elimination, because hormones are going to get basically eliminated through bile, which is made in the liver, which has to move through the GI tract and eventually helps to stimulate bowel movements. A certain amount of that gets eliminated when we have a bowel movement. It's the body's natural way of kind of house cleaning and getting things out. And so, just by the fact that if people aren't having regular bowel movements on the daily, they're more likely to have dysregulated hormones back up in those pipes, as amongst other things, not just hormones that aren't effectively clearing, but other things too. That's going to create a stress load on the system and just more kind of junk that the body's going to have to manage, especially, like I said, if those hormones are not getting metabolized down the healthy estrogen pathway, right? Like, it's just going to add to that problem. The second thing is there are certain bacterial species in the gut that when they overgrow, they can create this product called beta glucuronidase. And this is actually something that I measure on functional stool testing with my clients, that when that's elevated, that can also block the detox pathways. It's actually specifically blocking this detox pathway that's called glucuronidation, which is, again, another pathway that all of these things have to move through, including hormones. And so, what's really fascinating to me is when I run a functional stool test side by side with a functional hormone test, like the one I just described, and I see elevated beta glucuronidase, and then I see high estrogen markers on the stool, on the functional urine test, and I'm just like, okay, this isn't coincidence. Like, we absolutely have a gut component, and we call this dysbiosis, right? There's imbalance in the bacterial species in the gut, meaning bad guys are predominating. They're creating too much of this byproduct that's interfering with the ability of the body to get hormones out, as well as other things. We have to work from that level, or we're just going to be trying to band-aid the hormone issue all day long. And so that's a big piece of it. And sometimes people are not even really having overt major symptoms that, I would argue when you have kind of trouble getting toxins out, you're going to feel probably a little bogged down and brain's going to be a little foggy. You might feel kind of tired and just like not as good as you normally would be. But sometimes people are walking around, they're just not really aware that this is going on until we run these tests. So that's another one. And then, believe it or not, just even straight up nutrient deficiencies coming from either upper GI weakness, meaning the person isn't producing enough stomach acid, like you had mentioned earlier, Grace, with the acid reflux is 100% related to low stomach acid levels. They could have low enzymes, they could have poor bile quality. All of those things are super important for breaking down food effectively. And we have to be able to cleave our vitamins and minerals from our food through the digestive organs working properly. And so, if someone's got weak digestion, whether they've got GI symptoms or not, over time, they're not going to be getting the nutrients they need from their food. And one of the biggest nutrient deficiencies that plays a role in things like breast cancer is something like iodine, right? Like, we have the need to get some of these nutrients in through the small intestine into the bloodstream. And over time, like, to the extent we can't get that nutrition from our food, it's going to set the stage for these important cofactors that are needed to normalize the endocrine tissue, like iodine does, or even B vitamins to support energy production in the cells. And we could argue that all cancer states happen in low energy states of the body, where we see the energy producers of the cells, the mitochondria, right, are already kind of struggling to do their job. And a lot of times behind the scenes, we've got these nutrient deficiencies that are at play where the body just doesn't have those cofactors to kind of run the engine. And so that will start to set the stage. And then sooner or later, you add all of these factors together in the right combination, boom, you could have that situation develop. And, that really does get back to the gut and eating the right foods, but also having the ability to break down those foods and absorb them properly so that the engine of the body runs and the tissues are normalized and we have the capacity to kind of keep things moving through the system well. So those are probably the three biggest ones that come to mind in that situation.
Yeah, and it's really important to understand that, because my next question I'm going to ask you is, because I have a lot of women also who have decided to do chemo, and what's happening is the chemo is blocking them. So that pipe is jacked right up. And a lot of people are like, oh, but I do juicing and I've done this and I've done that and I'm all blocked up. And this is really important because it's not just one person. Unfortunately, I've seen so many people who then go into hospital because they've got severe pain, because they've been clogged up for like 8 days.
Oh,
And,
God.
and the thing is, because they're in so much pain, the ambulance comes, picks them up. And I always say to them, but what have you done? Oh, but, so and so told me to do this and this and this and this. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay for friends and family to try and help you out, but how can someone who's going through chemo allow that blockage to keep, well, sorry, allow that pipe, I should say, to keep
Yeah.
flowing,
Yeah.
because you've just added another element,
Right.
it's an
Right.
external element. So how do
Yeah.
you keep that flowing, I guess?
Yeah. That's a great question, Grace. So always with the disclaimer, this isn't medical advice, right? Because we know that this is a more complex situation we're dealing with. But the thing with chemo is it will really decimate the gut bacteria, right? I mean, it could go so many directions, and that kind of just is what it is in some ways. And I think the best thing you can do if you want to use good nutritional medicine alongside that type of medicine is, again, working on your diet and working with someone who can help you with that if you don't know what to do. However, I would say there are some really helpful natural supplements that can be used to help keep things going. I mean, with the caveat that this isn't going to be a root cause answer, right? Because we know that as long as the chemo's happening, that is really the process that's kind of causing this dysfunction. However, one of the things I will use for my clients that are dealing more with the constipation end of the spectrum is magnesium citrate. And it's a relatively safe, relatively easy thing to put alongside any kind of regimen you're doing. Now, always check with your doctor, right? Just to like dot the I's and cross the T's on this one. But it's a pretty relatively easy thing to supplement with. And you can actually go quite high with the dosing on that one if you need to kind of help move the bowels along. And it is important it's the citrate form because that will help to kind of like get more water into the intestines to keep things moving through so that we're not having like impacted stool or dry stool forming, which is going to make those situations obviously happen where people are getting so blocked up they're having to go to like the ER. So that's one of my favorite tools to use. The other one, and this is actually kind of even a good one to think about in the context of supporting the immune system, especially when it's going through something like chemo, which can decimate the immune system too, right? Like is vitamin C, believe it or not, right? Vitamin C in higher doses actually does stimulate the bowels. And so, in some of my more complex, like just challenging cases of constipation, I've actually had people kind of use them both or kind of pulse them back and forth where we might be doing some like divided doses of magnesium citrate and adding a little vitamin C in to kind of push that along a little bit more. And when you get it right, it can really work like a charm. Like you kind of know you're at that like right level when you're suddenly like, whoa, floodgates are open, like we're moving again. But rarely do I not see the magnesium citrate work, and especially in combination with a little vitamin C. So, those are generally very well tolerated, very safe, natural ways to start if that's a situation you're struggling with for sure.
And it's really, really, like you said, it's really important to make sure that you go to not just go to someone, but make sure that the dosage that we're talking about is appropriate for your journey, or your
Yes.
treatment, because everyone's different. Someone could be
Yeah.
taking a high dosage, someone could be taking a lower for the same
Yeah.
thing, but it's just the way their body's working. Like you said, the last thing you want to do is then turn it, because that's what IBS, when they were saying, what's IBS? IBS is 1 minute you're constipated to the max, and the
Yeah.
next minute you are running every 5 seconds. So you don't
Exactly.
want to go to the opposite side of the spectrum and make things worse. You want to balance that out. And it could even mean that you start taking it a day or two before your chemo, or a
Yeah.
day or two after your chemo. It's, like we said, we're not doctors, but make sure that you know yourself. But I think it was really important to touch on that because, like I said, we're talking about the gut. We want to keep the gut healthy because it's like you're trying to fix a part of you that doesn't cause any more issues.
Mhm.
And if you now have an external thing happening, you want to make sure that's not causing other issues, because unfortunately you get a tablet for nausea because you're taking chemo. Then you get a tablet because the nausea tablet makes you something happen in the gut. Then you
Yeah.
take something else to make sure that the gut isn't, affected by it. And before you know it, you're 20 pills in and you're all just gotten band-aid effects. Yeah, it's true. I've seen
It's
it
true.
happen. I remember it happened with my mum when she went through chemo. I looked at her, her report probably a few months ago, because
Mhm.
I help women with breast cancer. I look back at things and I'm like, oh my God. And my sisters were nice enough to actually write what they were. And, this tablet is for this, but then this tablet is because you're taking this tablet, and this tablet is because you're taking, and it's like, wow. So it was really, really crazy to see. So I thank you for explaining that, because like I said, it was really, really important that our listeners and viewers see how important it is to talk about the hormones and the gut health.
Yeah.
And if there's anything else we haven't touched on that you would like to share with our viewers and listeners?
I don't think so, Grace. I think really just the main thing to hit home, because I mean, I know too, although I haven't lived breast cancer, it's kind of been this background fear, growing up. Like my mom would repeatedly talk about, like, oh, your grandma got breast cancer. And then, like, my own grandmother had it in her 40s. So, I mean, I would almost say in today's world, like, show me the woman who doesn't have a family member who has it, right? Or has had it. And so, it always felt like this kind of scary thing hanging out there, like that would be the worst possible thing that could happen. And I think if that's the type of family culture you've grown up in, what I'm hoping to give you today is a little bit of hope that outside of the conventional zone, right? Like we live in a world in functional medicine and functional health where we have access to a lot of amazing tools and tests that can get you answers that your doctor's not going to be able to get you. So if you really want to kind of do that early on or even post cancer check, right? Because again, the stage could still be there even if they've done the removal of tissue and they've done the chemo, right? Like, best thing you can do is try to get to, okay, like, why did this happen in the first place? And what can I do to make sure that the chances are not stacked that it's going to come back in some way, shape, or form? And so, I mean, that also gets into obviously the importance of diet and lifestyle and just the foundational knowledge to know how to be well in today's world, which is not widely taught. And, it is relatively difficult, I would say. We just don't know how to do this. There's a lot of mixed messages we get from all kinds of places around how to eat and how to live. And, basic as it seems, like really people do have to learn this, I feel like, if they want to take it on as, a personal journey. So, but I think the main thing is just not to live in fear, and that you can take it into your own hands, and whether it's doing the testing on yourself or getting the tools you need to really put your health in a good place through your own daily choices, right? I mean, that's the most power that we can really have, honestly. And so I think that's really the biggest thing that I want to sort of share.
No, and thank you for that. I appreciate you sharing that because I always say it is really important that someone makes that they know their body better than anyone else. So if you are going through your cancer treatment or you've been through it and things are not they don't sit right. Just make sure. I always say to people, we're not here to, like you said, disclaimer, we're not here to say you must do this protocol and this alone. But I always say to people, I will never tell you what to do, but I will tell you to open and your options. And like you
Mhm.
said, if this protocol doesn't work, next, try
Yes.
something else. Try something else. But like I said, it's really, really, I mean, like I said, I'm now a big believer because it wasn't until I saw a different podcast where the gentleman was talking about the gut that it made me sit up because there was a lot of things, especially, like I know it's not nothing to do with breast cancer, but I do have a lot of women who say that they've got reflux issues.
Uh-huh.
And because of that, and I always say to them, you need to make sure you fix that because this gentleman goes to tell you about another disease that is
Yeah.
caused with reflux. And I'm thinking, it's the last thing you want. You want to get your gut fixed. And again, like we're saying, it's crazy because it's just out there. It's just out there now. More and more people are saying, guess what? You got to fix your gut. And it's not just the emotional brain anymore. It's
Right.
not. I didn't know this beforehand, but fix the emotional side, but also fix the physical side. Because, like you said, you might like a particular food, but that particular food, your body's probably producing what that food gives you so highly. And all you're doing is you're just jacking that up. As an example, I was told, which I don't even know if it exists anymore because I haven't been checked. But I remember because I take high blood pressure tablets, it was like, don't take any potassium, don't have any bananas, don't have any bananas. And then I remember
Oh.
saying, one doctor, I'm like, yep, I don't make sure I have any banana. And he's like, why? You need potassium. And I'm like, because I got told not to have potassium. He's like, we're not asking you to eat a box of bananas. And then I thought, well, who eats a box of bananas anyway? So again, see, it's misinformation. You need to ask the questions. Ask the
Mhm.
doctor the questions. Ask him, listen, you know, I'm I'm sure Courtney is here and I'm gonna, you can contact Courtney on her social media. Courtney Cowie NTP at
Yes.
Instagram or at Facebook, but I'll make sure I have all the links below. But I'm sure you can ask Courtney yourself. Ask her a question. Is there something that's happening with you? Hey, Courtney, I'm feeling like this. What do you think? And she will take you through the protocols or what she believes is the right thing for you to do going forward. Now,
Mhm.
unless you're in America, you can't send your stool in the mail. I'm sorry to say it because we would love to do that, but we can't. But make sure if it is something that you want to work with Courtney and you don't live in the US, there are places probably that you could go and do the stool test, but get those
Mhm.
results and give them to Courtney, and she will be able to help you find a way for you to get, these hormone levels in balance, the estrogen, the progesterone, and the gut all working with you and not against you. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people end up with Crohn's disease and things like that. Again, it's all to do with the gut. What are you putting in it? We all had those commercials of eat more fiber and less meat and all of this stuff. We all went through it, but
Yeah.
it's not necessarily one shoe fits all. So,
Exactly.
like you said before, my husband is doing the carnivore diet. He can have meat and butter and cheese, a bit of cheese and eggs. He can have that till literally the cows come home. But I, on the other hand, tried it, but my gut starts to feel funny and then it starts to hurt, painful.
Mhm.
It might not be the carnivore. It might be something that I'm lacking, or it might be the carnivore. So again,
Mhm.
get all this tested out, guys. It's really, really important. Courtney, I've really appreciated having you on my podcast. Is there any last words or anything you want to share just before we wrap this up?
I don't think so, but since you mentioned the socials, I will be going live next Wednesday. So if anyone's listening to this and they have questions they want to bring to that discussion, I'd be more than happy to engage those. So yeah, no, this has been such a pleasure, Grace. I'm so happy you had me on today.
It's just honestly for me, I've written all these notes all over the place because it's not just helping me, it's helping the people I help. So understanding this a little bit more and really getting to see like there's more to it than just take a pill. It's IBS. That's all it is. Like you said, it's deeper than that. Who goes and gets their hormone checked, their metabolism checked, their gut checked? Where do you go? Where do you go? You know what I mean? No one would even know. You go to a doctor and say, "Can you check my gut?"
Yeah.
What's he going to say? So it's really, really important. So thank you again for being on my podcast, Courtney. I really, really appreciated having you on my podcast. And to everyone else, thank you for watching and listening. And like always, I wish you so much love and light.